All right, right here at the AI Plus Expo for National Competitiveness, here at the AI Plus Career Stage, we are very excited to welcome to the stage, joining us, the Deputy Legislative Officer to Maryland's Governor. Please welcome Brad Fallon.
Thank you. I love the introductions. I feel like I'm at WWE, but I think I was the only dork that actually brought a slide deck, so I'm going to run through this, but I'm going to kind of keep it light. So glad to be here. Like I said, my name is Brad Fallon. I work for the governor of the great state of Maryland, Wes Moore. I'm a deputy legislative officer, which is a very fancy title to say that I am the governor's lobbyist. And unlike, candidly, other lobbyists, I am much more on the policy development side of things. Right, so whether it's legislation, executive orders, regulations, or implementation, my office is pretty deeply engaged in the development process. And then when our legislative session comes around, we're the guys that go out and look to get something passed. We had, can I get this working? There we go. My portfolio in particular, and really the focus of the administration, is on innovation and on tech. And those of you that work in Maryland or live in Maryland, and we have some folks here, know that our economy is completely built around that, right? We often say in state government, and it's a blessing because we have some recession-proof, we're really built around the eds, the meds, and the feds, right? We have University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins universities that have produced some incredible research. We have also in Johns Hopkins one of the best hospital systems in the world. And we have federal facilities like NIST or NASA Goddard. When I moved to Maryland, I was at Aberdeen Proving Ground or Fort Meade or Naval Base Pax River. We have so many assets in the state, and so much of that has been looking specifically at research and development, but we haven't realized all of the commercialization potential that the state has had for so long. Governor Moore says all the time, we're asset rich, but strategy poor. And a large part of my job is going out and trying to put that strategy together and then execute on it. And that's what we've been doing. So really what I wanted to talk about today is just a little bit less traditional for some of the other folks that are here, is really that pairing between how does government and tech and kind of the private sector work together to make sure that we're moving together with mutual interest. I did want to point out, Maryland is in a decent place to start out this process. We are #1 in the country on academic research and development. We rank 18th in industrial R&D, and we are 11th in real terms for venture capital investments. And that has been going up in recent years. There's been positive trends. We obviously have an ongoing situation between Maryland and kind of the federal government, and we'll figure out where some of that research dollars goes that's been housed within the state. But that really to us says that it's incumbent upon us to pick up that ball and make sure that we are encouraging that type of investment and really leaning in on the assets that we have. There we go. There we go. All right, I did want to, this is going to give me trouble, so I'm just going to keep rolling, but I did want to just tell you all very quickly about myself, because I think it illustrates a lot of what we're going to talk about. I don't have a tech background, right? I was a military brat. I was born in Alaska. I moved around as a kid between a bunch of military bases. I eventually landed in Maryland and Aberdeen Proving Ground. I went to high school here, then I went to the University of Maryland, and I got a government and politics degree, and for the last about 10 years, I've been working in and around the Maryland General Assembly. I've worked in campaigns, in the Senate, in the House, and now for the last 2.5 years with Governor Moore. I came in with his office to help stand up this office. That is not a background that touches at all anything that folks here are probably experts in, right? I don't have a venture capital background. I don't have an engineering background or any sort of science or STEM for that matter. And I have never worked in an environment where we're investing in tech. So when I came onto this job and I had some background in economic development and the governor said this is really the direction we want to take, there were really kind of two options. Right? The political hacks and bureaucrats that I work with can just kind of wing it and try to figure out how to chart this path forward, or we can work collaboratively. And that may sound really basic, but candidly, both the private sector and the public sector really struggle to bridge that gap consistently, right? Often people see tech in particular and government as kind of oil and water. They don't really mix, right? We often see that tech thinks, all right, government's just going to slow us down. And government often sees them as, okay, they're just trying to move fast and break things, right? And they butt heads. Something that the governor felt very strongly about when he took over in this administration was to point out that we are not barriers. We are not just regulators. We have to be partners in that work because Maryland's economy is based on it, And quite frankly, that's where our tax revenue comes from too. So I did want to just highlight a few things, because I wanted to open up with places where that has not happened. Right, we do have in Maryland, like I mentioned, all of these fantastic assets between federal installations, military installations, and academic institutions and hospitals, but we've never really fostered a innovation ecosystem around any of them. Some have tried, some are continuing to build that right now, but there hasn't been a long history of success in the space. You know, there's no reason with what we have that we shouldn't have a Silicon Valley or a research triangle. It's just been a matter of policy in the meantime for the reasons that we don't. I think we're gonna have to scrap the slide deck and I'll just talk to y'all. What I wanted to point out, we have a program called Rise Zones, which for those of you who are familiar with enterprise zones or opportunity zones, it's geo-targeting for areas where we wanna cluster certain types of businesses or attract certain type of investments, right? In this case, this was built around research institutions to bring in folks that are commercializing IP that it was developed at the Nexus institution. And the benefit for bringing folks in was a property tax credit. Now, this was primarily looking at tech startups. There was a 50-person staff limit on this. Some of the folks in this room might be scratching their heads because no small tech startup owns their building. So we created this program in a total silo years ago prior to this administration, and it did not get used at all because nobody had anything to claim it against, right? So there was a vision there. Folks wanted to be as helpful as they can to the private sector, but because it was done with a bunch of wonks like me without understanding how this stuff actually works, we ended up with a program that didn't do anything, right? So Governor Moore sent us out, we did fix this program, we changed it to a rental assistance program, and we have more incentives for investors to claim a tax credit should they invest in some of these companies and some other benefits, and that's just a small example. It's not monumental. But the reason I wanted to point it out is because it's also not atypical. You know, that became a trend in Maryland, where folks were not working with the private sector, even if they had good intentions in economic development. And so we were seeing program after program not being subscribed. So we were putting money away, but we weren't even throwing good money at bad. We weren't throwing good money at anybody. We were just reserving it, right? In this case in particular, we had to rebuild this, but it does show a broader trend, right? And over time, that trend has really become a culture. And that's what this Moore administration is looking to change permanently in Maryland, is really change that culture and move towards one of collaboration. So there's a couple things that I wanted to highlight that I think really encapsulate what that looks like. Maryland could be the capital of cybersecurity in the nation. And in my view, there's no reason that it shouldn't be. But sitting here today, I can tell you we have 30,000 unfilled cyber jobs in the state. So we're about short 30,000 cyber professionals in the state, and we are not turning around folks that quickly. We've had to really, over a course of years now, pull together with the Cybersecurity Association, with workforce development hubs, with individual firms, and figure out what kind of positions do you need to fill and what kind of work are they doing on. So we entered into a partnership with a group called Baltimore Cyber Range and the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. And actually, we're opening the last few in the coming months. We will have now a cybersecurity workforce training program at every single community college in the state, and we are significantly subsidizing it to make sure that we have centralized workforce hubs where across the state folks can empower themselves while we are delivering to the private sector kind of the workforce that they need. You know, we also have been investing broadly in cybersecurity through apprenticeships. That's a model that I think most folks typically think about as trades or more tied to labor unions, but that model is incredibly portable. In particular with things like cybersecurity, manufacturing, accounting even, you find lots of firms that really need folks and they would rather train folks for the jobs that they need and that individual receive a portable certification than somebody come in from a college institution and then have to kind of train to the specific needs of the institution. We have had significant buy-in on that. This year, Governor Moore introduced legislation called the RAISE Act, which created a new Office of Registered Apprenticeship Development and put about $10 million a year into scaling this up and providing some subsidies to companies to get them, incentivize them to try out this new model. We get a lot of companies are like, I'm not interested in workforce development, I don't know what apprenticeships are. We have been providing everything along the way and a dedicated team to make sure that we have sort of a concierge service to develop that curriculum and to get things moving, as well as providing some money to de-risk the investment. We've also invested significantly in quantum computing, and that's probably my most exciting piece, and that we have focused in on the University of Maryland College Park. Right outside UMD, there is a company called IonQ, which is one of the world's leading quantum computing firms. They are headquartered there. They have some facilities elsewhere. They had been considering leaving the state. I'm very happy to say we have now kept them. We are building a new headquarters with them, and they have pledged to double the workforce there. But more importantly than that, we kind of have been just chasing this. IonQ has been there for a while. We have been losing more and more quantum business. When this governor came in, he instructed us to figure out a path forward. So we pulled together with DARPA, with the University of Maryland, with the local counties, with academics, and with IonQ and other companies that have interest in some of the research coming out of Maryland. And through that, a series of conversations, we were able to raise $1 billion in investments into quantum computing. And that'll both be directly to the University of Maryland for lab space, for students, and to compete for some of the best faculty in the world in the space, but also to build up the infrastructure and kind of this ecosystem we're building that we call the Discovery District around UMD. We just the other day signed a memorandum of understanding with DARPA that pledged that over the next 4 years alone, they will match us $100 million. So every, the state puts up $100 million, they will match us $100 million. This would not be able to happen if it wasn't for those very early stage collaborations, and that's kind of what I want to focus in on, right? There are more examples than just quantum computing. We have biotech in the state, right? The Maryland Tech Council, which is the association for all the tech companies in the state for the most part, has been dead set on this. Kelly Schultz, who was a former Secretary of Commerce in the Hogan administration, has led that effort. We have been putting up money to develop this BioHub initiative to provide workforce training for pharma manufacturing primarily. We've also been working with Johns Hopkins, focusing in on where we can get our slice of AI, right? We have some real competitive advantages in the healthcare space, whether it is from biocomputing or it is just from the research that's being conducted. Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland, and particularly the Institute of Health Computing, really see this as an opportunity for the state to lean in on our niche, right? Whether that is all software-based or whether it is a device that somebody might wear with some sort of AI assist, that is all kind of where we are leaning in deeply, and I'm hoping to have the scale of investment that we were able to pull together for quantum computing in College Park with our friends at the Institute of Health Computing in North Bethesda and with Johns Hopkins in Baltimore City. With AI alone, this has presented a humongous challenge for the state. And really, I think there are a lot of folks, it's the biggest buzz in the world, right? And in Annapolis, it is no exception. Everybody wants to do something, but nobody really knows what they're talking about because we don't have many software engineers or folks with a background in machine learning in the General Assembly or in the Moore administration. What we have done is that the governor created what we call the Artificial Intelligence Subcabinet, which pulls together relative state agencies to really have a statewide approach to how we're addressing AI. And we have pulled in folks from the private sector and from federal regulators. We've also hosted just sort of roundtables. Lieutenant Governor of Maryland just hosted one with private sector and academics to really pull together, particularly on what the state needs to do to utilize this. Some of the innovation in the public sector can be done by folks like me, right? For instance, we do a lot of permanent licensing reform to make sure that we can get development much more quickly, right? And make sure that we have a speed to market in the state. That is a great use case for AI to be able to screen through these applications, particularly if it's just checking boxes to make sure somebody can move forward and actually grant either preliminary or full approvals. But before we do that, the number one concern that raises for folks, particularly in the General Assembly, is whether there are any biases built into those models. That is not something that we are going to be able to figure out on our own how to screen for, right? So we've been working with both private contractors and working with academics, as well as bringing some folks in-house. We created, through law, a new procurement process so that we can purchase these products and use them for proof of concept testing, so that if we want to use them for something like this, we can put in a bunch of fake data and see if it's skewing anything for any kind of key demographics that we're looking for. That's going to be a roll-in that's ongoing. Actually, this week, we'll release our new AI policy for the states. We have been embracing AI as a state to make sure that we are empowering state employees to be able to serve their constituents to the best of their ability, and candidly, just to make government more accessible to folks. I mentioned the University of Maryland Institute of Health Computing. That's another place where we've really leaned in on this. I mentioned that we were looking at AI. We put $30 million into establishing this in North Bethesda. It's kind of in the center point of a broader community. And part of what we kind of had to talk about is less just the technical skills, but back to the Rhizome example, the nature of the field, right? And so what we have really done is when we are starting to invest in areas, when we're developing this new Institute of Health Computing, we are also building in all sorts of public transportation and housing and other kind of placemaking, stores and restaurants and grocery stores. Because what we hear from companies when we sit down in the private sector and say, what's your number one challenge? with attracting a workforce, it often is, okay, how expensive it is to live there, what's transportation like, and do I like the area? Right? We're recognizing that there is a broader scope that the state can play here that is pretty unique from what a lot of these kind of tech companies are working on that really allow us to be a partner in that work. So around the Institute of Health Computing, I had a very lovely picture, but I am not tech savvy enough to pull it up. We will have this really beautiful stop in North Bethesda. We just announced the primary developer for that, and in the coming years, I really look forward to being there for a ribbon cutting and kind of seeing the community that comes from within it. So I know I'm running out of time, but I did just want to close. I gave some of that background because I'm asking everybody here, please talk to us, please get involved, please actually reach out to legislators, please reach out to your governors, or local folks that are making policy around this, because it's not just important for y'all, it's really important for us. We have shared goals, but so often folks like me don't even know who to call, or if they do, it's kind of just the one person who put their foot forward, right? Well, who knows if they're really the most competent person in the space. And so really that government engagement, both directions. You see a lot of folks like me from the Moore administration reaching out to the private sector, but it should be an open door to be coming to government and see us as a partner. For anybody that's not from Maryland, I think please keep that in mind. If you're approaching your state and they are not partners, come on over to Maryland, because we have our ears open for this and we are specifically focusing in on these type of tech sectors.
All right, we want to thank and give a warm round of applause to the Deputy Legislative Officer to the Governor of Maryland. Thank you very much, Brad Fallon.